Okay, hi everyone. We're Team 4. Our game is called Nuclear Kong, and it's based off of Donkey Kong. I'm Sophia. I'm the producer and artist.
I'm Kira. I'm also an artist.
I'm Jeremy, the programmer.
I'm Sahil. I'm a programmer.
And I'm Kevin, the sound guy.
Yeah, so this is our demo video. Yeah, so to go more into the actual story of our game, we decided that since Donkey Kong is about climbing a tower, we would climb a nuclear power plant instead. So you are a lab worker that has to climb this tower and defeat the evil boss of the company that owns the tower, and then pull this lever that will stop the flooding that is currently happening in the tower. So we had to decide which aspects of the original game to keep and also what to add, just because there's so many aspects in the original game. So we decided to keep the barrels just because they're such an iconic and recognizable part of the game. We also kept the dimensions of the screen because it really gives the player the feeling that they're climbing. And we also kept the format of having 4 rooms make up 1 level because that creates a lot of trial and error. Also, we added the rising water mechanic, which adds extra tension to the game. And we also added extra triggers like doors, like buttons and levers, which will unlock doors.
Okay, so we did quite a bit of concepting for this game. We have some of the preliminary stuff here. For example, we have the exterior of the nuclear power plant, as well as preliminary designs for the player character and some of the mobs. Here is more finalized concept art I did. I'm going to speak on the designs a little bit. The main character is bright yellow because everything else is dark and it makes for great contrast. This guy is kind of boxy and intimidating because he's evil.
Yeah, so these are some of the environment sprites that we made. There are the pipes that are the platforms, and there's also 2 types of barrels. And these are some of the weapons that the player can use, as well as the buttons and the levers, and there's also an animation for one of the barrels.
So here are the loading and title screens I did. They're supposed to kind of establish the player in the environment and also let you know what the stakes are if you lose. And I did some test animations at a larger aspect ratio because I'm not that familiar with pixel animation. These are how it turned out. And we also have a lot of other sprites for the player character. So we have jumping, idle, this is climbing, and these are front and back sprites for ladders. And we also have 2 types of enemies in this game more suited for nuclear power plants. So we have slimes and rats, both of which have movement and dying animations. And finally, the antagonist, who has 4 animations, placing down a barrel, preparing to jump, and idle, and also walking.
Yeah, so on the left is the original tile map that we were going to use, but we changed it to be brighter to stand out against the black or the dark background. And you can see all the different types of platforms against the background here. We also have different drafts for the backgrounds, but we eventually just went with 1. And to talk about the level design, I made a couple of the levels, and we decided to keep or be inspired by some of the platforms and their shapes in the original game just because they're so well known. So you'll see that this first one has a lot of slants, which creates a lot of different routes for barrels to take, which makes a really interesting composition. The second one is a lot more horizontal with horizontal conveyor belts. The third one is also loosely inspired by that picture on the right with the 2 elevator-type platforms in the bottom left-hand corner. And the fourth one is also a pyramid shape, and you'll notice that all of these give the player lots of different routes to take, which increases interest in the game.
Okay. For the programming side, one of the most important thing and one of the things that we spend most time on is the player controller. Since this is the arcade game, we want to make that like quick arcade feeling, so we increase the acceleration and the gravity of the player. And another very iconic movement of the Donkey Kong is climbing. This movement is also creating a lot of dynamic to the game. This is one of the early prototypes of the water system. It's basically reflecting all the things above the water and give it a distortion effect. And this is how it looks like in the actual game. Again, we want to create the arcade quick, fast-paced feeling. That's why the water is always increasing and chasing the player. And for the environment, two things that we are working on is some conveyor belt and the elevator, which also, as Sophia said, increase the route choice and the dynamic of the game.
So now it's time to talk about level generation. So originally our idea was that we'd make like 10 to 15 rooms per level, and then each level we would randomly choose 4 of them every time you play the game. However, we soon realized that's just way too many rooms to make, and we do not have time for that. So we instead decided we would handcraft each level with 4 rooms stacked on top of each other, like you can see on the right, where the top room leads to the next level. So here are our 3 enemies. We have our classic barrels that we knew we would add from the start because of how iconic they are in Donkey Kong. And then in order to replace the fire enemies from Donkey Kong, we decided to make rats and slimes because they fit the nuclear theme more. So first are barrels. Barrels are pretty similar to how they are in Donkey Kong. When they're falling, they fall straight down. If they hit a slope, they go down the slope. And if they hit flat ground, they go towards the player. Additionally, whenever they go over a ladder, there is a chance that they can go down the ladder as well. Then we have rats, which go left and right between the boundaries of a platform, and slimes, which also go left and right between the boundaries of the platform, but can also go up and down ladders sometimes. So originally, barrels were a lot more random, and then rats and slimes had a lot more complicated features in order to increase interest. But we realized that Donkey Kong is a game about simplicity and predictability. And so in order to make the game more simple and predictable, we ended up removing the randomness from the barrels and removing the more complicated features from rats and slimes.
As for the theme music, I tried to make a retro 8-bit vibe to try and match the original arcade design of the game. And also, I tried bit crushing nearly all the audio and further to improve the arcade vibe. As you can hear, it's also very rhythmic to emphasize the rhythmic nature of the game. And next, we also have the jump sound effects, which are abstract as the original are, but are different in that it's more subtle. And lastly, we also have walk sound effects further to emphasize the rhythmic nature of the game, as the original did not. And we have 6 different ones in order to introduce some variety to the game.
Now it's time for some final thoughts. So we were able to get a lot of features into our game, and we're pretty proud of that. We were able to get a lot of our framework done early, and we kept that productivity running through for pretty much the entire project. However, our project did run pretty victim into scope creep. There were a lot of features that we wanted to add that we didn't get to. And while we did work on a lot of framework early, we spent so much time on framework and not enough time on integration that a lot of our mechanics that we wanted to add, we never got to. And one last thing is that this was a lot of our first introductions to what is effectively a 9-to-5 job. And while it was a lot of work, we came out with a game that we're pretty proud of. So thank you all for listening.